Welcome, and thank you for joining Energy Dialogues for the next installment of the Energy Dialogues University Connect podcast. This podcast highlights intergenerational conversations about potential concerns the younger generation has when it comes to energy, opportunities to join the workforce in the sector, and why this is such a great time to do so. We also give insight into a day in the life of executives in the energy industry, offering a unique snapshot at the peak of their career. Prepare for frank conversations between the generations, discussing the opportunities and challenges of energy and its critical need to recruit the leaders of tomorrow. You will gain valuable career advice, as well as learn lessons from some of the leading minds in the business. We are at a pivotal moment now, with the energy industry experiencing ongoing change, and there has never been a better time to join a sector that focuses on solutions for human development and energy access globally. This podcast will address concerns, encourage and enlighten the rising stars of the new generation, and share how our network of prestigious leaders got to where they are today. And now, I'd like to hand it over to Chloe Young, Co-Executive Director of the Energy Dialogue sponsored podcast, Energy Terminal, who will be speaking with Norris Wright, Vice President, Gas, LNG, and Low Carbon Origination at Constellation. Chloe?
Thank you, Benna. So, Norris, we are super excited to be talking with you today all about your personal experiences in energy and also Constellation as a whole. But I'd love to kick us off with, if you could tell us a little bit about your start in the energy industry with trading and what your main lessons were from this time.
Sure. Nice to meet you, Chloe. I got energy was actually a little bit of a second career for me. My first career was working on the Chicago Options Exchange as a pit trader. And so energy really caught my eye as I was moving on from that first career as being a very dynamic industry and actually one that depends very heavily on sort of that option theory in terms of pricing products and how the kind of energy system works. So I got my start at what was then Exelon. Exelon was the largest producer of nuclear power at the time, but we had a lot of different types of power generation. Like the dispatchable generators really were run off of option models. And so my start was really more on the modeling side, improving the modeling on like how we look at power generation in a position, how we value them. And then I moved on to more physical trading of power and learning how to dispatch the plants and really getting into the weeds of how the energy system works on the physical side. But Exelon was a great place to start. I would say, from a commodity perspective, it's great to look at commodities both from a financial traded market perspective, but also really learning the physical side of it is absolutely critical to truly understanding the product you're working in.
That's great. And taking a deeper dive into your current firm, Constellation Energy. Constellation Energy is the largest producer of clean, carbon-free energy in the U.S. Can you talk a bit about what Constellation does and why you decided to join Constellation?
Yeah, so Constellation is ultimately what Exelon kind of morphed into after some acquisitions, and then the divestiture of Constellation from what is now the utility company called Exelon. So, what attracted me to the energy industry again was just it really related to my first career in terms of option trading. It was something that I really saw a corollary to, but also a space where I could learn a ton. From the perspective of why I joined Exelon, that was back in 2005. So Exelon, now Constellation. Back in 2005, the idea of carbon free or really the carbon neutrality of the products you were producing was not at the forefront quite as much as reliability. And so carbon neutrality, the importance of having a carbon-free portfolio really evolved over time. And it was probably around 2013, 2014, where Constellation really kind of figured this out and really started trying to leverage the carbon-free energy we had in our portfolio, and that has really snowballed into the company is now, where we're very focused on promoting the attributes, the carbon neutral attributes of our nuclear power plants. But that's in combination though with a lot of through the Calpine acquisition, a lot of dispatchable assets. And so what was so important back in 2005, reliability, and what is so important now, the carbon neutrality, we're really seeing the two of those come together, and the realization that you really need to have both in a efficient and functioning energy system. And Constellation sits really honestly at the sort of pinnacle of both of those. And that's why I really love the company right now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think Constellation is so unique when it comes to energy for this exact reason that you're talking about. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about your role. So you're the VP of Gas, LNG, and Low Carbon Origination. So could you tell us a bit more about what this role specifically entails?
This role really is three very distinct businesses, some of which I inherited, some of which I started. And all three like very interesting and kind of the what they do at Constellation. So I'll start like gas origination is really a sort of traditional structured origination business. And I really enjoy this. This is very much infrastructure focused. It's about doing longer term, more complex transactions, some infrastructure building. So we've built certain pipelines and those types of things to build redundancy of fuel supply into our power plants. Very interesting type of business that way. One of those ones that's not like trading insofar as trading is like lots of transactions in very short term, and origination is more like big transactions over long periods of time. You can work on a transaction for years. And then the LNG business is really, it started being focused on two terminals. One, the Everett Marine Terminal, which is an LNG import facility in Boston that Constellation owns. But also when I came into the business, we were developing LNG export facility in Texas, along with actually a lot of other folks who were looking to kind of catch the second wave of LNG terminal development. Ultimately, that terminal didn't sort of make it out of the pandemic that kind of flipped the LNG industry on its ear a little bit. And so really now it's just focused on Everett Marine Terminal in Boston. And it's the largest LNG or largest storage facility in New England. And we import LNG for winter peaking reliability in the New England area. And so it's a business that's very, very focused mostly in the winter, but we've got a lot of months that we have to manage in between the winter and resupplying the tank and those types of things. So that's the second business I manage. And then the third business is one that I started in really 2022. And that is our low carbon fuels business. And that was started as a very, very small business that the Constellation had on the retail side, really trying to address a few of our retail customers looking to buy renewable natural gas or RNG. And that was kind of one, maybe two transactions, small transactions in a year. And I took that business and turned it into more of a wholesale business. So that is targeting a whole lot more customers. It's targeting a whole lot more transactions. And so we brought that into the wholesale portfolio in 2002. And RNG is probably the biggest focus, but we trade carbon offsets. When hydrogen was really trying to make an emergence as a market, we were working to, with a lot of companies that had hydrogen interest. And that is by far the sort of like biggest growth opportunity in terms of what I run, in terms of addressing new markets, addressing decarbonization from the fuel side of the portfolio.
That's great. Thank you. One thing that I think Constellation does really well is being pragmatic. You don't isolate yourself from traditional energy by being overly climate focused, but you are still dedicated to accelerating the energy transition with clean energy. How do you maintain this approach, and why is being able to bridge traditional and clean energy so important?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about Constellation now, since we've been sort of spun off from the utility, well, totally spun off from the utility, which also happened in 2002 or 2022, um, is that we do get to be more nimble. And when we were vertically integrated with the utility, that was much more difficult. And so you've seen really a great evolution of the company that is looking at what's happening in the energy marketplace and able to respond with the different transactions we bring forward, the products we're selling to our customers, and then the assets we own. And so, we start with the nation's largest portfolio of nuclear power, carbon-free energy, and all the important things that brings with it, and the importance of maintaining that portfolio and making sure our nuclear power plants can run into the foreseeable future. But nuclear power is one of those things that's always on. So if you will, it just runs flatline, and the energy system is needing a lot of different things now. Particularly, you see the penetration of wind and solar. Wind and solar are not always flatline; they're sort of up and down, and peak and trough along with obviously weather. And so what happens is the system becomes very reliant on other power plants that can dispatch in unison with how the renewables are moving up and down, and that is the gas portfolio that we've bought with Calpine. Though the transaction's yet to close, and we hope to close it by the end of the year. That was really the impetus to look at that portfolio and say, wow, all right, we want to remain the nation's largest producer of clean energy, but we also want to be a big player in ensuring the reliability of the energy system. And it's the dispatchable natural gas power plants that Calpine have that are so critical to that. And I would overlay then, Calpine's also a leader in looking at the decarbonization of those types of assets. So they have a carbon capture and utilization project on a gas plant in Texas that they've been advancing with the federal government or through federal government loans, and that's quite a long way along. And then they have another carbon capture project that is still kind of at the beginning stages in California, but looking at them and seeing that they're moving forward in those types of projects was very attractive to us as well.
I think you made so many great points there, and I really want to highlight on the aspect of reliability, right? Because yes, energy should be more sustainable, and I think that is incredibly important for the future, but we need energy for everything we do, and keeping the lights on and keeping the power on is one of the most important indicators for quality of life. So it's just so essential. And yeah, I really appreciate kind of everything you were just saying there. And then kind of on this note, I mean, the energy industry is changing and the elements that make up our energy mix are changing. So from your perspective, what do you see as the future of the US energy mix, and what role do you see different technologies playing?
I mean, it's a hard roadmap to develop, and a lot of it depends on how demand evolves as well, right? So I can say, one of the things we really firmly believe in is continuing the operation of our nuclear power plants, and in fact, trying to squeeze more energy out of them through what we call uprates, which is really taking an existing power plant and making some adjustments and some refurbishments to our turbines to squeeze a little more power out of each one of those. We definitely see the need for that base load carbon-free megawatt going forward, without a doubt. But we also see that the energy system is getting more peaky, if you will. So the energy system kind of runs very very, I don't want to say flat, but very predictable for long periods of time. But then when you see extreme weather events, extreme heat, air conditioning kicks on everywhere through industry, through residential load. And then the flip side is, on the heating side, when we have these big cold snaps, same thing. The energy system demand really, really spikes. And that's becoming more and more spiky as we electrify things like heat pumps, where like we're plugging in more EVs and those types of things. It's more demand on a system from an electrical standpoint. And so, again, I think the system will continue to need wind and solar. We'll obviously, use our nuclear uprates. But you have to maintain the dispatchable power plants on the system. Batteries are starting to make some good headway, but batteries aren't a sort of long duration solution, so they can help you out in a couple hours during the day. But they're still a ways off from being able to sustain a system for, let's say, a half a day or a full day really reliably and being able to kind of follow load the way that a natural gas plant does. So, I think our hope is that we're starting to get rid of the more polluting, load following, or peaking plants like coal or oil and those types of things, replacing them with some natural gas while technologies like batteries continue to make advancements and that type of thing. Further down the road, small modular reactors, there's a lot of money being invested there. It's a great way to grow the nuclear industry in very sort of small chunks. That's one of the problems on the nuclear side, is just the capital investment for the types of plants that we run right now are so big. But small modular reactors, I think, if you ask any of the industry experts, are still 10 years-ish away. And hey, we've got a lot of load demand that's coming on the system in the next 3 to 5 years, and we've got to address that. So, it's going to be an all of the above. How much of which technology is, really an unknown.
Awesome. That makes a lot of practical sense. Thank you. You mentioned the importance of combining natural gas and renewables for reliability purposes. However, a lot of people, young people in particular, are very anti-natural gas and traditional energy from a climate perspective. What would you say to people with this belief?
It's understandable, and there's, I think, some examples of folks who are charged with the safety of those systems, the safety of extracting hydrocarbons from the ground, and being good actors and maintaining those systems to be as low emitting as possible. There's just unfortunate examples of folks not taking that seriously enough. I would say, by and far, the majority of the industry takes it very seriously. And so, I guess my message is, don't let a few bad actors kind of take away from the absolutely critical role that natural gas and the hydrocarbon industry really contributes to not just our energy system, but so many other products and things that we buy around the world. And it's always good to strive to be better, to be less emitting, to enhance the technologies that are zero carbon. And you have seen, actually, oil and gas companies invest billions of dollars towards that end. But it's not a step change type of thing that's going to happen where all of a sudden oil and gas is just going to go away. It's going to be a progression.
That makes a lot of sense. And now we're going to jump sideways a little bit to talk about nuclear for a question, because I think it's pretty hard to talk about Constellation without bringing nuclear up. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the nuclear work being done by the company and what excites you about this technology?
Well, I think two things to point out. I spoke a little earlier about the uprates that we're doing, and that is really exciting. At I think a highly competitive cost, we're able to bring more megawatts on the grid to the tune of like an entire new nuclear power plant at a fraction of the cost of breaking ground on a greenfield nuclear site. So that's really exciting for our company. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes a lot of time. Certainly takes a lot of capital investment, but still, a much lower capital investment than building something new. So that's very exciting for us. We're excited to bring more nuclear power to the United States through those projects. The other thing is, addressing. It's hard not to bring up data centers in any energy conversation these days. So, we made an announcement with Microsoft back in September 2024. That we're actually bringing a retired nuclear power plant back to the grid to serve one of their data centers or many of their data centers. But it's entirely being, the offtake is entirely to Microsoft. And that's really exciting. And we have a lot of other conversations going with other technology companies around other nuclear power plants that we own and operate to do similar transactions. So it could be at existing nuclear sites or around some of the upgrades we're doing. But we have a lot of those conversations going. And these are big, high dollar projects that demand a lot of creativity. And so while I'm not working directly on them, I certainly hear about them, and they're really exciting opportunities for us. They're exciting opportunities for the United States in terms of, really advancing our ability to meet data center load.
That's great to hear about. Thank you. The energy industry is always changing and has changed a lot since you first got involved in the space. What has been the most surprising change from that you've experienced in your time in the industry?
There's been a lot. I'll start with when I started in the energy industry, we were a net importer of LNG. And that flipped on its ear due to the shale revolution and our ability to extract so much oil and gas via hydraulic fracking and new extraction techniques. That couldn't have been a bigger game changer for the United States. Our economy literally depended on how OPEC set oil prices. And being a net energy exporter now is really just it's a huge change for the country. And how our economy works and the different business opportunities that it's afforded the energy industry. So that's probably one of them. That's probably a really, really big one. The renaissance of nuclear is another one. When I came to work for what's now Constellation, there was a real movement against nuclear energy, and we've seen certain countries like Germany and say no to nuclear. Japan, for a time, shut most of their nuclear power plants, sort of understandably so, due to the Fukushima incident. Though they're starting to bring those back on. But this renaissance and sort of emergence of nuclear power as now, hey, a recognition that it's a carbon-free megawatt and a whole lot of it. That has been really great to see, because those of us in the industry, those of us who worked in the business, have always sat there saying, wind and solar is great, and yeah, build it, but don't forget you've got this like highly reliable, massive carbon-free energy coming out of these nuclear power plants. And to see, the vast majority of the country and the world really start to embrace that again, that's also been really cool.
Awesome. And a quick follow-up to that, how do you stay up to date about changes in the industry? Are you kind of are there any podcasts or news media that you can recommend to other listeners?
I have to admit, I'm not a huge podcast listener. I will say this: there's a lot of different publications out there. Quite honestly, Houston Chronicles business section
Yep.
is an amazing resource in terms of what's happening in the hydrocarbon industry, particularly obviously focused on Texas. You have different publications like RTO Insider, which really focuses on the electric markets and what's happening at the independent system operator level of the energy industry. There's so many different ones. S&P puts out a lot of great information. Wood Mackenzie does as well. I read lots of different newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, BBC News, Financial Times. So, I mean, it is just a whole lot of different resources. And I would say always try to go through different resources, not just like depend on one. It's really good to hear different perspectives on what's happening in the energy industry, not just from different domestically published resources, but ones around the world. Oxford Institute does amazing papers and white papers. And then the last thing I would just say is I spend a lot of time traveling and meeting people and talking to them about what they're doing. So one of the things I've been very lucky to do is live abroad as well as live in different parts of the United States. And I do make a lot of effort to maintain my network and meet with people as frequently as I can and just listen to what they're doing and what they're working on.
I think that's such great advice. And yeah, learning from other people is really, really one of the best ways to go about it. And then another quick question before we kind of come to an end is, I'm curious for you. I mean, there's so many challenges in the energy industry, so many changes that the industry is facing. What do you see as the greatest challenges facing the industry today?
Well, I mean, and I'm not the person who coined this phrase, but the energy trilemma is really it. That's making energy sustainable, affordable, and reliable. And it's very hard to have all three all at once. That is it. I think in a nutshell. But that's what makes the industry so fascinating and so fun to work in. It's challenging, and there's no clear road ahead. It's not like being a tax accountant where you April 14th every year is your key date. Everything changes. It changes constantly, and it's being changed by government, by NGOs, by the corporations who are, in the industry, by companies that are startups with amazing ideas on how to solve, some of these problems. So, and you never know where they're coming from. And so, the challenge is being able to sort of surf that wave and find ways to be productive and participate in the right wave.
Great, thank you. Last question from myself, and hopefully you can speak on this, but can you share what enticed Constellation to sponsor Energy Dialogues' Carbon Solutions Forum student cohort this year, if you're aware?
Very aware. Myself and Kate Norman, who was my manager at the time, attended the North American Gas Forum, and we saw the student cohort that was sponsored by Williams. And we're always looking to recruit new talent, and it just seemed to be an amazing way to not just for us to recruit new talent, but to just generally get the next generation really familiar with what happens in the industry. At these conferences, you hear various viewpoints, and Energy Dialogues does a great job bringing different perspectives up on stage together. But I think it really goes a long way to make what's happening in the industry more real. There are things you study in the classroom, and that tends to be formulated more from prior years. But when you come to these conferences, you're hearing what's happening now. And back to the question about challenges, you're hearing the challenges, how companies are thinking about overcoming those. And I think that's so critical when you're coming out of school, be it undergrad or graduate school, and thinking about a job in the energy industry, to really understand what it is you're going to be working on, because it demystifies that a little bit, and hopefully opens folks' eyes to all of the things that are going on in the energy industry. So for the Carbon Solutions Forum, that focuses on the business that I manage, our low carbon fuels business. We thought, hey, this is a great way to get folks into a conference that is about the hydrocarbon industry, but about how the hydrocarbon industry is addressing climate change and looking to decarbonize the different processes that we work on every day.
For sure. And then, so I do a decent amount of podcast interviews, and I've kind of learned that there's a question that I really like to end with, because I think it's easy when we talk about energy to really get bogged down in the challenges and what's not going on all of these things we have to work on. So I really like to ask the question, what gives you hope when it comes to energy?
That is a good question. Well, I mean, energy is it's a great question. I think it's really what I was talking about before in terms of how dynamic this industry is, where you have people who have been in this industry for 20, 30, 40 years. And then you have people who are working on startup companies that are addressing potentially just niche parts of the industry, but those niche parts can be super high impact. And so it's the variability, it's the ever-changing challenges that we have, and watching people step up to meet those challenges constantly. And that's what gives me hope, is there's no lack of participation in trying to address the problems we have. And so it's really, it's fascinating. And it's the kind of, where there's a will, there's a way. Energy demand happens, that it will continue to happen. It will continue to grow. So there's no dropping the ball here. But you have a lot of super smart, super motivated people who are, in this industry. And that always, I think gives me hope for sure.
I couldn't agree more. So Norris, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I learned a ton from this conversation, and I'm really excited to share it with the audience as well.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for the great questions, Chloe and Eric.